Today I'm going to tell you about my marriages that I had. My first wife that I had, Susietta, was the name. She's the mother of my twins, Charles and Charlene. I was 18 when I met her. I was working in a furniture store in downtown Paris, California, and her mother and stepfather had bought some furniture for us, so I went to deliver the furniture. And there was this young girl giggling, and you know, and she was cute. And this is a picture of her you can see here. Uh, so I talked to her a little bit, and then I had to go. Now I didn't. She wasn't going to school then because at that particular time she had already had 3 children, and she was taking night classes sometime, but she really wasn't going to school. So I had no way to really know her, and that's how I initially met her. And then I guess about a month later, 3 weeks to a month later, I was at the little local movie theater that we had in town, and I went in, and she was at the movie. Her and her uh, 2 stepbrothers, they were at the movie. So I asked my buddy named Sherman Jackson. I asked him, "Man, you know much about this girl over here?" He said, "No, man, but I heard she got a lot of kids." I said, "Well, I don't care about the kids and stuff, so I'm looking for the woman." And she was cute as she wanted to be. This is a picture of her right here. Anyway, I went over and I talked to her, and we struck up a relationship, and uh, we had a good conversation. And after that, we started dating. And then after dating her, she went with me to my senior prom. We dated quite often, and we went different places. We had a lot of fun. And then I got that famous marriage proposal. Uh, uh, you're gonna have a what? Yeah, she told me she was pregnant. And me being the man that I wanted to be, I said, "Well, no problem. We'll get married." So my mom and pop, they didn't want me to marry her at 18 years old. They didn't want me to marry a woman with 3 kids, the first time getting married and stuff. So, they actually tried to talk me out of it, but I was PW, so couldn't nobody tell me nothing. So they wouldn't sign for me back at that time in California. You had to be at least 18, or if you got married before you was 18, you had to have your parents' signature. So, as I said at the time, I was 17. And on the day after my 18th birthday, we got married. Uh, as I said, I was working at the furniture store, so I was making a pretty good little income, and I was working after school and stuff. And I had rented us a apartment. I rented us a nice little apartment, and the manager or the owner, Mr. Louis Talent was his name. Flame Furniture was the name of the furniture store in Paris, California. Anyway, he told me, he said, "Hey, sure, Harry." He said, "Man," because I was one of his star salesmen, because by my mother and father having a mom and pop grocery store there in town, everybody in town knew us. So I had a lot of customers. A lot of customers came to see me and stuff. So he said, "Harry," he said, "whatever you want, man." He says, "to furnish your apartment and stuff." He says, "Get what you want." And anyway, she told me, he says, "We'll make an account for you, and we'll take a little bit out of your paycheck every week to pay for whatever you want." Now, at that time, color TVs were just coming out. Before then, everybody had black and white TV. And so didn't many people have a color television. So I was lucky enough that I got us a nice big screen color TV, and I bought us a nice sofa and love seat and a nice bed and headboard and everything that we needed, dining room table, the whole bit. I laid out the place beautiful and put it in my nice apartment. Her and I, we went down to the Justice of Peace, just her and I, and we got married. The marriage only lasted about maybe 6 months total. I didn't know nothing about being no husband, and I guess I was her first husband, and so we didn't get marriage lasted 6 months, and it was after that that I went and started traveling on the magazine crew. The magazine crew we went from door to door selling magazine subscriptions. What we were, I learned later, we were circulation builders for major magazine companies. So we would travel all over the country going from door to door selling magazine subscriptions, and we was doing it on the premise that we was college students working our way through college and stuff. And so in actuality, we were paid 35% of whatever we wrote. So, and if you were any good at all, you could easily write $100 a day. Was, you know, if you was decent, you could do that. A bunch of $10, $15 appointments. Yeah, I mean, orders, you know, from the people. So it wasn't long till I worked up to manager and stuff where I was traveling around. So I really enjoyed that. I got a lot of chance to meet a lot of people. And that's where I met my second wife. My second wife, she was on the crew. She joined the crew. She was from Philadelphia. And she joined the magazine crew. And we had a thing on the magazine crew that whoever wrote the most business for that morning sit in the front seat. And so me, being a good agent, because I was used to talking to people, because like I said, I grew up with my folks with a mom and pop grocery store, and a lot worked at the furniture store and stuff, so I had a nice rapport with people, and so I could sell pretty good. So I was used to being number one. But anyway, she come and opened the front door and said, okay, get in the back seat. What you mean get in the back seat? She had written more business than me, you know. So I had to follow the rules. I got in the back seat. And she continues to write more business than me. That girl, she sold more magazines than you could think of. You know, I would come in with like $200 and she would come with $300. So it got to be one of those things, if you can't beat them, join them. So after being together for, it must have been about 8, 9 months, we started a relationship between her and I. And about 6 or 7 months after that, we moved in together, where we had a room together. And she was really, really, really good to me. The girl really loved me, and she really, really treated me good. She bought me gold watches and diamond rings, and she even bought me a brand new 1968 GTO. I had wanted at first, I wanted a Buick Deuce and a Quarter, 1969 Buick, or actually 1968 Buick Deuce and a Quarter. That was the 225, and that was the going thing at that time. And I really wanted a Buick Deuce and a Quarter, but by not really having no steady address, would nobody finance me, and I ain't had no money to buy it free. I mean, I didn't have enough money to pay for it cash, even though back in those days you could get a brand new car for like $3,000-4,000. I mean, it wasn't much for a car. In fact, you could get a new car for $2,000 if you wanted to afford the shipping. Anyway, she told me, she said, well, don't worry about it, Dad. Harry, she said, I get my dad. He'll finance for me. He'll co-sign for me, and I get you whatever you want, you know. So like I had thought about that deuce and a quarter first, but the hottest thing that came out those years was the GTO. Uh, the GTO back in those days was was like a hot rod. It was one of the fastest cars out in that era. The Dodge Charger, the Cuda, the GTO, the 442 Oldsmobile. Everybody was making fast cars back in those days. So I said, well, let's get a GTO. So she said, okay. So she caught the train and went back to Philadelphia to her dad. And we were in New York, the crew, we were in New York City. And she called me and she said, Harry, she didn't even have a driver's license. She said, Harry, come get the car, it's sitting out front. So I hopped the train and Grand Central Station and went into Philadelphia. And they met me at the train station and the car was there. And so I was so happy I didn't know what to do. Beautiful sky blue GTO. It was more like a royal blue than a sky blue. Back in those days, Atlantic City was the place to go in the summertime. Now it wasn't any gambling there, but they had the famous boardwalk there, and the beach was there, and everybody hung out at the beach in Atlantic City. So her sister, her sister's husband, and we all jumped in it and drove to Atlantic City. I was so happy I knew what to do. And we went to a few nightclubs in Atlantic City. We really, really partied hard. We had a very, very good time. And then we came back. But back in those days, I was around a lot of women all the time because there was always like 30, 35 people on the magazine crew, and half of them were women. And I had worked up to the position where I was a junior manager. So as a junior manager, I was the one that took them out to the different areas to work. I put them out and say, here, you work this street going that way, going back to the left, and I put somebody else on that side, you work this way, going that way. I was the manager. I'll pick you up, say at 2 o'clock for lunch, and I'd show them where I'd pick them up at and stuff. And that was a junior manager. So I got paid a salary. They paid me back then $237.50 because first he was paying me $200, but my first wife, she did have the babies, and she had twins, and my child support payment at that time was $25 a week. It was $100 a month, $25 a week, and so I was having it taken directly out of my salary and sent to them. And then she was telling me, she said, $25 a week's not enough. She said, because by them being twins, one was drinking Samilac milk and the other was drinking Fond du Lac milk or something. They had 2 different milks and stuff. So I changed it to $25 and then half of $25 again, which was $37.50, because by my mother and father having a grocery store where we get everything wholesale and stuff. So that's what I sent back. So they raised my salary to $237.50. And then the boss's wife, Mrs. Alcott, she would write a check every week and send it in to Riverside to pay my child support. So that took care of that. Anyway, Frida and I, we had a very, very good relationship. We traveled all over together. We had a couple of breakups. As I said, back in those times, I was young, and it was right in the middle of the sexual revolution. And yeah, I played a little bit. There was women all over me, and because I was like one of the bosses, and a lot of these young girls was from places that they had never left. They, like you haven't seen no ghettos until you go to Philadelphia, Chicago, Cleveland. I mean, I thought I lived in a bad place in Paris, California, but man, back east, uh, people was getting killed, and you didn't have no backyard, and when you walk out your front door, you right on the sidewalk, you know, and your car was parked on the street, and you had to scramble to get a parking spot and stuff. I mean, it was different, and a lot of the kids that came to work for us, they had never been anywhere, hadn't seen nothing. The kids hadn't seen chickens, hadn't seen cows. A lot of them had, like from Cleveland and different Midwest cities and stuff, where there's actually in the country there's a lot of animals and stuff, but in the city they didn't never see that. They never seen animals before, any at all. So I would take the time and I would take them out to different farms and ranches and zoos and stuff to try to expose them to as much as I could. And because I remember when I was young and first starting on the crew, and a lot of things that I didn't know, and somebody took the time, most of Mr. Alcott, they would take the time and explain things to me and show me things and stuff. So that was a big part of the education of traveling. So, because a lot of times you see things, but you don't even know what you're looking at, you know. A lot of times you be places, and you even don't know where you're close to, you know. See, like, I've been in Detroit a lot of times, but I never went to Motown. And Henry Ford has got a museum there. It's the most fantastic thing you ever want to see, right outside of Detroit. And I've never been there because I didn't know it was there. If I had known it was there, I went there. All the different places where I knew there was things, I went to see them. But back in those days, I was looking for a party, and I knew where all the party places was, and that's pretty much where I went and stuff. Anyway, like I said, we did have some difficulties, but then you got to remember, whenever Frida and I broke up, that means I lost my car too, because my GTO was registered to her father, you know. So anyway, we finally broke up. And then she went to her brother he had joined the Air Force, and he was stationed in Dale City, Oklahoma. There's a Air Force base there, and she went there and stayed with her brother. I didn't know where she was. I tried to find her, and her mom and dad, they wouldn't tell me where she was and stuff. They really didn't appreciate us living together anyway. So we had made a deal that if she get a divorce, her mom said, if you marry her, then y'all can live together, you know. But I couldn't marry her because I was still married to my first wife. So I had worked up and saved enough money. I bought me a new 1969 Grand Prix. So I jumped in my Grand Prix, and I drove back to California for number one. My brother was graduating from high school. My little brother, he was graduating from high school, Paris High, in 1969. So I wanted to go to his graduation. So while I was back, because the crew at that time was in Philadelphia. So while I was in California going to his graduation, I talked to Suzette about getting a divorce, and we drove to Las Vegas and we got a divorce. And then and in Las Vegas you could get a one-day divorce, you know. So her mama couldn't believe, because I came back with divorce papers. She had to call to see if they was real and stuff, because everywhere else it took a while to get a divorce, but in Las Vegas, Nevada, at that particular time, you could get a one-day divorce. So anyway, I drove back to Dale City, Oklahoma, and I picked her up. And Tinker Air Force Base is where he was at, right outside of Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. Anyway, I drove back, I picked her up in Dale City, and we drove up we stopped in Philadelphia, showed her mother the divorce papers and everything, and then we went on up to Massachusetts. At that time, most of the time, as I said before, we were staying in Seekonk, Massachusetts, because the boss's son was in Brown University, right outside of Providence University, right out of Providence, Rhode Island. So the crew was up in Seekonk, so we was going to go up there and get a divorce. I mean, get married, but we didn't get married there because you had to get a blood test, and then the blood test sometimes took a week or two for they would come back so you could get married. So we didn't get married in Massachusetts. So when we came back down to, I think it was Philadelphia, we came back down to Philadelphia, and her and I went over to Newark, New Jersey, Newark, Delaware, and we got a divorce. We got married in Newark, Delaware, just her and I. And then we stayed on the crew, I guess 2 or 3 years longer, because I was on the crew altogether for like 5 years or so, and better than half the time that I was on the cruise, she was there with me. So we left and came back to California, and we bought us a nice home in Rubidoux, California, and she got a job at the Press Enterprise, which was a newspaper. Girl was real smart. She was real smart. She could type over 100 words a minute and stuff. So she got a job working as a proofreader at Press Enterprise, which was the local newspaper in Riverside at the time. And she actually, she retired from there. She worked up to where she was almost on the place, but that was years later. Anyway, she got a job there, and I got a job. At first, I got a job at a tire shop. First, my brother had got me a job. He was, at that time, building mobile homes, so he got me a job at one of his places, building mobile homes. But, you know, I wasn't really used to no real work, and that was work, you know. So, anyway, I saved up enough money to, well, I opened a gas station. I opened a gas station. We did pretty good at doing the gas station because I was selling tires out of the gas station too. Because when I left the trailer place where I was working with the trailers, I got a job. I took less money, working more hours at a tire place because I knew what I was doing more so than working at the trailer plant. So anyway, I worked there long enough to learn what was going on and stuff, and then I opened a gas station. And then right in the middle of doing good in the gas station, we had a gas crunch where all the gas was gone.